All right, let's dive into this. In this explainer, we're going to break down a really provocative argument from our source material. And the central claim we're looking at isn't just about simple corruption. It's about a calculated, system-wide deception.
This quote right here, it really gets to the heart of the argument we're about to unpack. The source material is basically saying that what a lot of people might see as just social problems or political failures is actually a carefully designed system.
So, where does this all start? Well, the argument presented in these sources kicks off with something truly explosive: a federal indictment aimed at a major civil rights organization.
Now, you've probably heard of the Southern Poverty Law Center, right? The SPLC. They're famous for tracking hate groups. Well, the main allegation from our source material is that the SPLC itself is the one facing a federal grand jury indictment.
And we're not talking about small stuff here. The sources get very specific about the alleged charges: wire fraud, making false statements, and even money laundering. I mean, these are all incredibly serious federal offenses. And there's a number attached to all this, a big one. The claim is that we're talking about over $3 million. $3 million, all allegedly funneled through shell companies between 2014 and 2023.
But here's where the story takes a wild turn. The most shocking part of this claim from the sources isn't just the money, it's where they say that money went. We're talking about informants and leaders inside the very white supremacist groups the SPLC is famous for fighting. You know, the KKK, Aryan Nation, the whole lot. So this brings us to the core of the whole thing, right? The alleged deception. How could an organization that's supposed to be fighting hate be accused of, well, funding it? Let's break down the argument. Okay, so here's the argument in a nutshell. This alleged funding wasn't some kind of accident. The sources claim the SPLC was literally bankrolling hate to keep the very problem they were raising donor money to solve alive and well. In other words, the allegation is that they were manufacturing a crisis.
And this quote from the material just sums it all up, doesn't it? It alleges this two-faced operation, a public front of being the moral authority, while behind the scenes, they were supposedly feeding the machine of racial hatred.
Now, the sources argue this isn't just a one-off thing. They frame it as just the latest chapter in what they call a long-running historical playbook. So the source material tries to connect 3 points in time that seem, totally unrelated to build its case. It starts way back in 1865, with the sources claim that the Democratic Party founded the KKK. Then it fast-forwards to the 1960s with Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society welfare programs. And it all leads up to the SPLC's alleged indictment, framing it as part of this continuous long-term strategy.
And this quote from the source material really drives their point home. The idea is that while the faces, the suits, and the language have all changed over 160 years, the underlying playbook of creating dependency and division has, in their view, stayed exactly the same.
Okay, so if this alleged social engineering project is real, what's the fallout? What are the real-world consequences? Let's look at what the source material cites.
The sources really zero in on welfare policies, like the Great Society. The argument they make is that, look, the stated goal was to help families, but the alleged result? A system that, in their view, actually gave women a financial incentive to have kids without a father in the picture. They're basically saying it rewarded the breakdown of the nuclear family. And this, they say, is the result. The sources point to the statistic that today over half of all black children in America are growing up in a single-mother household. They claim this is a direct consequence of these deliberate policies. And the fallout, according to the sources, doesn't even stop there. They also link the strategy to a whole host of other social issues. Things like the glorification of gang culture, drugs flooding into communities, discipline being stripped from schools, and a culture where they claim personal responsibility gets shot down as acting white.
And the source material makes a really crucial point here. They allege that the very thing they claim is the strongest predictor of avoiding poverty, a stable two-parent home with a married mom and dad, has been systematically taken apart and even mocked as being oppressive. All right, so after laying out this entire, architecture of deception, what's the end game? What's the conclusion? What's the big takeaway from all this material?
The motive, according to the sources, is all about politics, pure and simple. The claim is that this whole system is built to keep communities dependent on the government, angry at enemies that were basically created for them, and of course reliably voting for one party. Because, as the source puts it, self-sufficient people don't stay on the plantation. So what's the fix? Well, the argument in the source material ends with a proposed two-step solution.
First, it calls on people to recognize and reject what it calls Democrat engineering. And second, to shift the focus back to rebuilding the family, making it the core unit of a healthy community again.
And so we're going to end this explainer with the source material's final, pretty provocative question. And it's aimed right at you. After hearing this whole argument laid out, have you been informed or have you been engineered?